All right, in part one, we talked about exporting from Maya to Unity. We're going to continue that. We're just going to use a little bit more complicated type of situation here. In this case, we're going to use vegetation. Now, the introduction of vegetation is you start to introduce alpha channels, right, to get those leaves and that kind of thing set up. We also talked about the different ways that we can export. We can export just as the FBX using the export command in Maya. We can use the send to Unity, setting up our Unity project and exporting out that way. Or we can do the one that I personally prefer is the game export. Now, before we do any of that, we want to make sure that we bring our textures over into Unity. If you're not sure why I'm doing that, go check out part one for that. So I'm going to open this up and grab everything that I have for grass. I'll grab my files for my trees. Let's see here, there's another one for the tree. Let's see, there's another one for the tree. There's pine, there's the vegetation. I think that's all that I have. So I'll go into Unity here and I'll just put it in the generic folder. I'm just going to grab these over and bring them in right like that. So we'll just wait for that to come in. And there they are. I just paused it. It was taking a little bit too long. So they've imported in. Remember, we also need to choose all of our normal maps and change those into normal and say apply, right like that, so that Unity knows that those are normal maps. Excellent. So let's get rid of our rocks here. Not our camera, our rocks. And let's go back into Maya. Now let's start with these simpler objects here. So we've got some grass, we've got some dandelion weed, we've got another tall weed that was grown in my backyard, and we've got a fern here. So I'm going to export all of these guys out. So I will say File, Game Exporter, and we're going to export just the selection. And we're going to export each piece into a multiple file. And we'll choose 2019 and ASCII. We'll go ahead and turn embed media off. Actually, let's leave it on just for the heck of it and see what happens. Let's go ahead and say where we're going to save these. We're going to save them in the same folder that we put in those rocks. So we'll just choose that folder. Don't need a prefix, but let's just go ahead and put one in. Just so you guys can see what's happening. I'm going to go ME for my medieval village type of concept with an underscore, and we'll say export. All right, we'll wait for that. Export successful. Great. Let's go into Unity. It starts to bring those in. We'll go into our mesh, and you can see there, even with our dandelion, fern, grass, all of that stuff there. However, it doesn't quite look right. So let's bring in this grass, for example, and let's just hit F and zoom in a little bit. And you're like, what the heck is going on here? That does not look right. There's something going on. So the reason is because of the type of settings that the material have. And you see it's right here, it's transparent. But you can see we can't change it right now. Right? We can't change it because it's embedded in. So we're going to extract the material. So we've extracted textures before. We don't need to do that in this case because they're already in here, right? We don't need that. But we do need to extract the materials. So we're going to go ahead and say extract materials. And I'm just going to put it in the same folder that the meshes are in. So I'll just say select folder. And we'll wait for this to finish. All right, great. And right there's the material. I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder here. I'll call it materials, and I'll plop that into there just so we can tell the difference between that and other objects. Now you can see I can change this object, right? So, you know, hey, look, I can add metallic, I can do all kinds of stuff. But the big thing here is I want to change the type of rendering mode. Right now it's set to be transparent, and that's more of a setting for things like glass, where we want to see the reflections and that kind of thing. We definitely don't want that on here. So I'm going to change this. So if I go to opaque, right, let's see if this is going to change itself. Let's go ahead and get rid of this guy and make sure we're bringing in a new one. Come on, let's grab that. Why isn't it letting us change that material here? Let's put it onto there. All right, that is not correct at all, because it's the wrong material. All right, so let's choose the right material here. Let's get rid of this guy and make sure we extract the right one. So we extracted it, say, for the dandelion, right? So let's put that in there. Hey, there we go. All right. So you can see with this material, with opaque, there's no transparency at all. And this is what it looked like with the transparency, right? That's not right, right? That doesn't look good. So, well, what are these other two? Well, fade gives us a little bit better of a result. Still allows some transparency and can cause some reflection to happen. We don't really need that for vegetation. So I'm going to switch this to cutout. And you see that even gives us a little bit better result. Cutout is if it's white, you can see it. If it's black, you can't see it, right? It gives a very, very defined edge. Now, if your alpha channel is not super defined, that could be a problem. We'll see that when we come to our trees. We also have this ability, let's zoom in here a little bit, maybe to like this edge right here. We have this ability to control our alpha cutoff. So you can sort of say, oh, okay, you know, how much? It's almost like a little border control. Now, most of the time, around the middle, the default looks pretty good. And for this texture, that doesn't look bad, right? Let's do that again, just because I fouled it up a little bit there at the beginning. Let's extract this texture here. So we'll just grab this grass here, and we'll say extract the material there, and we'll just put it in the materials. Wait for that to do its thing. All right, great. So now we've got two in there. Let's go ahead and put the that grass in here. And there's this one again, right? At least we got the right one selected this time, right? And let's take a look at the grass and see, we have that sort of transparent issue. So this time we know. Let's jump straight to cutout. And you see, oh, look at that. That looks a lot better. We could try fade, right? A little bit different, right? It looks like it's fighting for transparency rights there a little bit, so I think we'll do the cutout. We can zoom in a little bit, and you can see this one. The alpha's not nearly as clean, but we can play around with that. And I think again the 0.5 is probably plenty in this case, especially since my character is going to be looking at them like way down like that, right? So just again another way of doing this. Now, with this one, we have another option, right? And this is typically just for vegetation. Let's go into that grass again, and instead of using the standard, right? Instead of using the standard material here, we're going to go down to nature. And we can try some of these different things. Even though this says tree, let's try tree leaves. And we'll see, hey, it cleans up a little bit. We could bring in a normal map in here. We get rid of the shininess. I don't need any of that. But, sort of a different look. It depends on what you're trying to accomplish. I personally like that better. So I'm going to change that to the nature tree leaves. Let's bring in some of our other models here just to see what's going on. I'm going to grab these two trees here, Right, now each one of these is one object, right? So they're completely one object. So to export those as uh, multiple files, that's going to work. So everything else is pretty good. I'll leave that little ME on there, and I'll just say export. And we'll bring it back into Unity. And we'll see let's see, there's our pine tree, right like that, and our second pine, right like that. We'll go ahead and just get rid of this grass for right now. So you see we have the same problem as we did before. So let's take the pine tree A and we'll extract its material, and we'll put it right into there. All right, and let's see, tall pine right there. Okay, and we can see, oh, okay, we want to bring down and say try a cutout in this one. Let's maybe zoom in here a little bit. You can see that if we get super, super close, our alpha is a little bit raggedy, right? You can see that. You can also see that on this object we actually have two materials. So we're using this, and it actually created a clone of that one material here. So I'll just go ahead and make that one a cutout. Actually, this one this is just using the pine trunk is the only thing that's using that, so we can even just make that opaque. But for this here, we're using this second one, this tall pine, and we'd want to use cutout. We could try fade, and again you'll see that, but again it sort of gives this weird transparency fight that's going on here, even though it gives us a better result there. So we try transparent. We know that one doesn't work if we go into cutout, right? So you sort of have to balance out that. You could try to go and make your alpha channel a higher res and more defined and all of that. But again, how close is the player going to get to this? We're going to stick with it with that. Let's do the same thing for this guy. All right, so we've got this matte vegetation on here, and we'll extract that material. Now, if we would have exported all these out at the same time, we would have only had to do this one time. But we'll go ahead and bring this guy out. We'll say extract materials. And we'll wait for that. And we'll select this guy, and we'll change this to cutout, and there we are again. Excellent. Let's get rid of these two guys. And let's export out our last tree here. So we'll go back into Maya. And you can see this one actually has two pieces, right? So I'm going to export that one out by itself, and I'm going to export this out as a single file, right like that. And let's see here, any other settings that I need to change here? I'll leave that on. I'll do that, leave that on. Let's see, I think we'll just go ahead and export that. Great. We'll go back into here, let it bring that in. Where did it go? It's in here. There we go. And we'll bring that in, and there's that tree. And we see we still have that same problem, right? So we're going to grab this and extract the material. Wait for that to finish. And there's the ash tree, and I'll change that to cutout, and you can see that looks so much better. Now, in this case, because the alpha is nice and crisp, you can see we have a really nice cutout. It's, you know, we're not dealing with super thin needles or anything like that. All right, so just different ways that we can do that and mess with that. You could even combine some of these materials if you wanted, because they're really the same. We'll we'll leave it for now and talk about that at a later time. Hopefully that's helpful, and good luck.